Yes, sir. Welcome to the OBR streaming network where we are live with the React. My name is Brad Ward. The man next to me is the one and only Pete Smith. We have a huge show for you tonight. Lots to talk about, much to discuss. The boys are back in town. They have all reported to Berea and will prepare to go. I guess they're doing some conditioning, testing yesterday and today. They will do a light workout and then head off to the Greenbrier tomorrow. So, yes, it is underway, training camp 2024. Pete Smith, what is up, Pete? Follow Pete on Twitter at _ Pete Smith _ the news of the day. Amari Cooper. We're going to dive into it. How are you doing, sir?
Well, I believe I had that, but good. I mean, look, we're underway. We get to go. We get going, and there's not a lingering thing now. It's just focus on football and all the other things. There's no discussion about distractions or any of the crap. It's all about getting these guys on the same page, getting better, full steam ahead.
Yeah, so we're going to dive into the Cooper deal and kind of hit it from all angles here. Better. There was really, this is the React. We react to videos. There really was no videos to react to. I figure we can make the best one out there. So we're going to do that here and react to all aspects of the contract. And we've got a couple videos for you later. Offensive line rankings from PFF. Very interesting. It'll sound very familiar to you. And a very interesting video to finish off the show. So make sure you hit the like and subscribe button at the bottom. Hit the notification bell so you know every time we go live. It just takes you a second. It's totally free. Just go down there and click that button. It helps us out tremendously here at the OBR streaming network. And if you're on Twitter, hop on over to the OBR or to the OBR's YouTube page, youtube.com/Orange and Brown Report. All right, so let's do this. We've been waiting. We've been discussing this. Let's throw this up here. We kind of threw this together. So we knew going in, Amari Cooper, $20 million, no money guaranteed. And he signs a no extension, just a restructure, which is now makes his $20 million guaranteed. He can earn up to $5 million in earnable incentives. And they took $10 million of the 20 and gave it to him, and I guess sort of a signing bonus, but they're giving it to him up front, right? So they can restructure that appropriately. Probably cap benefits there, right, Pete?
I'm sure that's always part of it, the ability to shift how the money works. But yeah, I mean, it's giving him something for the right up front to help grease the skids and get this thing going.
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? So we were in a conversation. We've talked about this a lot, this deal a lot. I thought interesting. I just saw Schefter had tweeted out that in the end, that $100 million deal that Cooper signed, $80 million of it will end up guaranteed. That's pretty interesting. But I was talking 2 years. I thought, they didn't want to go into 2026 with this deal. We had our insider report that they were kind of, Brad Stainbrook saying exactly this, that maybe they just give him the 1 year, and that's not what Cooper wanted. Does this feel like it kind of feels like a temporary fix to me? Does it feel that way to you, Pete?
Well, it just gives the Browns a lot of options. So initially, the reporting for Brad Stainbrook was that the Browns were offering basically guaranteed money now and then another year unguaranteed, which would basically put him in the exact same situation he was in this year, next year. And what Cooper was saying he wanted was guaranteed money for 3 years. So seemingly the conversation would have been, well, them in the middle. It seems like the Browns were just uninterested to committing to Cooper beyond this year. So you give him more money this year. He's happy. Now you set yourself up to a situation where he could potentially hit free agency. So if Cooper's great, they could potentially, as the season rolls along, they could sign him to an extension in the next year, or they could wait till after the season and get him before free agency starts. Then obviously if it gets to free agency, he's sort of potentially out there. Now the Browns could franchise him. They could transition tag him at that point. They probably don't want to franchise him because then it's suddenly a giant $25 million meatball sitting on their cap that they can't really maneuver with. At that point, the Browns would probably tell Cooper, hey, go get your best offer and we'll match it or not.
Mm-hmm.
But I think part of the reason the Browns are making this bet is because if Cooper wants to win, he wants to, win a Super Bowl, there aren't a whole lot of teams that can offer him much in the open market. And so it limits the amount of potential suitors he has. And at that point, hell, I hate moving. I don't know a lot of people who do love moving. So there's like an incentive to just stay here and sort of finish out another year with the Browns and continue to work from that angle. The other possibility is that there are other ways they could go. They could look to the 2025 draft. Yeah. They could also look at trade options. So you and I have talked quite a bit about Brandon Ayuk as an example. Let's just use him as a framework. If Brandon Ayuk is stuck with the 49ers this year, as it appears that he's going to be, and he goes into next year and the 49ers were to franchise him and have to trade him, not unlike the Chiefs just did with L'Jarius Sneed, nothing prevents the Browns to potentially then trade for Brandon Ayuk. Now that could extend to a lot of people in that same situation, but it's again, the Browns are a team that famously likes to have as many options as they want. So if Cooper's great and healthy and everything else, they could just extend him another year and keep this relationship going. If not, then they could look to a trade and do the next sort of Amari Cooper or Jerry Jeudy or something else in that mold. They could look to the draft. They could have a lot of different ways to sort of play around with this, but it doesn't, there's certainly a meatball out there that's sort of hanging out. Well, what happens after the year? The Browns could lose Cooper and get nothing.
Yeah.
There's a possibility that could happen, but it also just sort of allows the Browns to play this in a number of different directions. So on some level, you sort of, one, you're happy that the deal is done and Cooper's in camp and everything's going full steam ahead. On the other hand, I don't think unreasonable to go, well, doesn't this sort of put us at sort of an awkward spot going to the offseason and next year? Potentially, that's certainly an option. Whereas if you go the Earl the Pearl route and sign him to 15 years, $355 million to get him signed or whatever it was, he was, if you overpay him and he stinks or he gets hurt, which would be the more likely scenario that he would sustain a major injury, then you're not attached and you can sort of move off. So I think that's the Browns play. I think it leaves room to be second guessed. I think it's not unfair for somebody to go, well, the Browns should have given him 3 years and whatever he wanted because you think his game is going to translate. But given where he is at 30, 3 years is a long time. A lot can happen in 3 years. I tend to side with the Browns on this. And I think Cooper gets a better deal than what the Browns were pitching. As I've said all along, I thought I sympathized with Cooper. I thought the idea of taking guaranteed money next year and being stuck in a contract where you're sort of just back in the same situation was a bad idea for him. I understood why he wouldn't want to take it. So I think both sides are happy-ish. Cooper potentially gets his freedom. Brown potentially have more options. But it does sort of just, when we get to next, let's say the Browns have a great season this year and Amari Cooper's great. What the whole conversation is going to be linked to the offseason. Well, what are you going to do with Amari Cooper? What are you going to do with Amari Cooper? And endless speculation. We just went through this with endless speculation, and he was under contract this whole year. So that's going to be sort of where this ends up.
Yeah. So he goes from Pete, real quickly. He goes from at $20 million. Here, I have this up here from previous shows, but from $20 million where he was here at 20th the 20th highest paid receiver, to if he were to hit his what they called earnable incentives, right? He would go up to the, I guess, tied for 8th highest paid receiver. So, I mean, the potential is there. It's a nice jump. It seems more like it's more about the security. I got to be honest, though, Pete, that I think that, although, at the end of the day, this gets him into camp and it gets the focus back on football, which is ultimately good for the Browns. And it feels like the Browns this feels like Andrew Berry sticking to his number a little bit, right? Or sticking to his
Correct.
guns a little bit. Like, hey,
Yep.
I think Cooper wanted a long-term deal here. I think that's what he was trying to use his leverage. And we talked about it and I wrote about it, that his leverage only goes so far because he's under contract, right? And if you're going to make him play and you're not going to budge off of the 1 year, this is what you end up with. You end up with, okay, I don't want to risk injury. And then the Browns kind of concede, we'll give you, an attainable $5 million raise and we'll guarantee this year. But ultimately, they didn't budge. They didn't move off of this at all. It makes me feel like this is kind of what they wanted from the beginning, was him just to play it 1 year at a time out with them while Amari was looking for something long term. I mean, we saw him in that video, like, I'm trying to get paid. Really, he's making $5 million more than he did if he hits his incentives. The guaranteed money is obviously very important to get him on the field, because if you're crazy to let your client go out on the field with no guaranteed money as the only number one a team has. But that's the extent of his leverage because of the contract. You're still under contract, and the Browns stuck to their guns. That's what this feels like to me. Like, feels like Amari kind of got the short end of the stick here and was kind of forced to take what he had to take.
Maybe. I think the two sides needed each other too much, which is why I always thought this deal was going to get done. Amari Cooper needs the Browns need Amari Cooper. And if he has another great season, and there's every reason to believe he will, he's going to get extra $5 million. That's a win. I will take $5 million if you want to give me $5 million more dollars. Barry McBride, by all means, give you $5 more million.
Right.
I think it's a win-win from that standpoint. But I think you're right. The Browns were sort of wanting to do 1 year and play it out, which is why they were offering, we'll guarantee this year and stick you on the contract next year, which was completely unguaranteed and would have allowed the Browns to potentially cut or trade him, which is why I think it was a bad deal for Cooper to take. So the Browns do end up in the situation they want, but Cooper gets something out of it and potentially his freedom if that's what he wants. So I looked at it as a win-win. Again, it just sort of leaves questions that will eventually need to be answered. But for the time being, the Browns are like, we've got Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore, Cedric Tillman, Jamari Thrash, and David Bell all working, and potentially some of these other guys. Like, that's a good situation. And again, I'm talking about what this sort of means is that right now, Jerry Jeudy is the one guy who's on this team for the foreseeable future. And they obviously are hoping that Cedric Tillman takes a step forward. Hopefully that they're going to get Jamari Thrash is going to be here. David Bell's going to take a next step forward. This is interesting for one particular player that stands out to me. One of the winners in this deal is Elijah Moore, because all of a sudden we were talking about Elijah Moore as a dead man walking. Elijah Moore is sort of just waiting to have a great year and go away. Well, if let's say Cooper doesn't want to stay here another year and Elijah Moore has a great year, I don't think they're going to have to pay him like premium receiver money. But if they feel good about him, they save money on him and then either trade to go get somebody else or draft somebody else, or maybe Cedric Tillman takes a step forward. And then in terms of the Browns, you can usually bet on Andrew Berry making the play that's going to give him the most options possible. And this, again, gives him options. So now the Browns can, without necessarily saying it, Elijah Moore, who was in a contract year anyway, was theoretically in a contract year to go play for 31 other teams. Now Elijah Moore has all the more incentive to be not only a great player for his own sake, but potentially be the best teammate he can be because he could be here longer term. If he's great with Deshaun Watson, the Browns are going to be foolish to sort of turn him away. Again, it works on a whole lot of levels. And Amari Cooper still got to go ball out because he's going to want that leverage to go get more money. So again, there are questions that are going to need to be answered, but the Browns get a lot of what they want, which is everybody has incentive to go out and be the best possible player they can be. They've got incentive to go work hard. Amari Cooper gets $5 million extra, which should make him happy. And you and I have sort of talked about this. Everybody has described him as disgruntled. I never got that impression from him. I got him as a guy who was trying to handle his business and maximize his leverage. Boom, $5 million, smile on his face, ready to go to camp. Everybody feels good. Focuses on what's important as opposed to, well, what about this, this, and this? So again, I think on a lot of levels, this really works out for the Browns, but like that's the sneaky guy I think who wins on this, which is potentially if he goes out and has a good year, and I think he will have a better year. We'll see about statistics, but I think efficiency wise, Elijah Moore is going to have a better year than he did last year.
Well, it's music to my ears because we're a pro Elijah show here, so I like that. Yeah.
Granted, him balling out puts him in the best position to get his next contract, but I look at it like the Brandon Ayuk situation, obviously on the different points. Part of the reason Brandon Ayuk wanted out because he doesn't see a future in San Francisco and wants to go wherever he's going to have a future and get started. Like there is sort of this little thing, eating at the back of your mind. I think T. Higgins may run into this where you're sitting there going, I want to be good for the Bengals and all this, but you're always thinking, where am I going to be next year? Do I really want to put everything into this year? All these other things. Are we ever going to have a situation where you're like making a business decision and giving guys incentives to potentially be all in here is great. Andrew Berry has a tendency to reward guys who play well here and extend guys that he believes can have a future. So I like that element of this. So we enter this season. Jerry Jeudy's the one guy on an extended contract, and they need him to sort of be that guy. But other than that, it is basically 5-6 receivers now on the depth chart who all have something to prove.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's a great point about Moore too. Very good. Now, here's my other question about this. So if they go out, now the Browns have not, they're not one of those teams that like cuts off negotiations during the season. They've in fact, gave Delpit an extension in early December last year in the middle of the year. They've done it a couple times actually, given extensions mid-season, early December. If Cooper is trending towards another 1,200-yard season and doesn't show any signs of slowing down, do you think they revisit this before the end of the season?
Yes,
and try
absolutely.
it. Yeah,
absolutely. Why wouldn't you?
What I thought too. Yeah,
and then it becomes let's get a deal done before the end of the year so we don't avoid this, or and for the reason that once you get into free agency, like then at that point Cooper has more incentive to just be like, I'm going to go ahead and wait. And the Browns did this last year with Delpit at the end of the year, which was get it done. Looks very prudent given what we saw from like Xavier McKinney and Antoine Winfield Jr., which is they got massive contracts. But like if Amari Cooper's playing really well, he feels really good about his place here. And that would suggest that hopefully that means Deshaun Watson is playing well. Then there's going to be all that more incentive to sort of get a deal done and figure it out ahead of time. So the Browns can sort of figure out how they want to navigate the cap, which may allow them to pay Amari Cooper just a little bit extra, as opposed to going into the offseason and then getting a position where you're like potentially talking about franchise tag, which the Browns have to hate the idea of so much, because while you're sitting there, it's just $25 million or whatever the figure would be sitting on your cap and it cannot move. You cannot maneuver around it. It's just sitting there, this big, ugly figure. And the Browns like to be able to maneuver how they want to maneuver. And at that point, if that's sitting there and you're now over the cap, like you can't do anything about it. You actually have to get underneath to figure it out, which is why I don't think it's a realistic option.
And they could need the franchise tag for a guy like JOK, right? Like, let's talk about that real quickly. I mean, we're talking contracts, we're talking Cooper. Let's talk about JOK real quickly while we're on this. You're watching the react here tonight before we get into our videos. So JOK, has been in, according to Brad Steinberg, has been in talks with the Browns, and they quote unquote are not seeing eye to eye. I think that was the quote. And I guess this is because we get the feeling that, it sounds like JOK is asking for top of the market money, right? Like, or higher in the market money. Now, the interesting thing about the linebacker market is it stretches from, all the way from, his range, technically. If you look at what Jack Duffin's work has done, he had him at 3 years, 10 million. So 3 for 30. And that was kind of based on the idea that Jermaine Pratt got a deal for around 8 million or whatever it was. And he was the first linebacker not to play all the snaps, right? And so he kind of, Jack kind of put him in that column. I think that going forward, JOK is going to play about 100% of the snaps. And I do think that if you put him in that boat, I think he kind of slots in, and tell me if you think I'm wrong, below Tremaine Edmonds at who's getting like 18, but a little bit ahead of Milano and Patrick Queen, which it could be anywhere between 13 and 18 million a year, which is probably what him and his camp are thinking. Do you agree with that or no?
I think JOK's camp is expecting a contract that pays him like he's playing 100% of the snaps. I think the Browns are looking to extend him like a player who played 71.6% of the snaps, which is what he did.
Right.
And I know Jim Schwartz has talked about him getting to a point where he's never coming off the field. That's why I think ultimately this deal is likely to get done during the season, where the Browns, if they're willing to stick to those guns and say, hey, we want to see you play 100% of the snaps and be that impact player and all these other things, that I think over the course of the season, let's say it's 10 games or whatever, or any number, where they plays 100% of the snaps and he's still impactful and he's not dealing with lingering issues that sort of slow him down and sap his effectiveness. I think at that point, then they have to deal with him like he's a player who's taking 100% of the snaps. And I think for JO's case camp, I don't see a whole lot of incentive for them to wait. Or I should say, I don't see a whole lot of incentive for them to sign now. I think they are better off sort of waiting and seeing if that's the case. Now, that could backfire if JOK sustains a serious injury, and maybe there's a little bit of a hesitation where they sort of, they meet in the middle a little bit. But I think the Browns are basically saying, you need to prove that you can do this before we're willing to pay you that much money. And if not, hey, here's this very comfortable deal right now that will pay, if it's 3 years, 30, like he suggested, and you want to get the safe money that is going to be there no matter what, this is what's here. So I think there's every reason to believe that JOK's situation is going to linger into the season. It may be like Delpit last year, because I think they had some of the same questions with Delpit. Not necessarily a full-time player, but just wanting to see more.
Yeah, to see more. You want to see more. Yeah.
I would not be shocked at all if that's the situation with JOK. I would be shocked if the Browns get to a point where they let JOK get out of the season without a contract or let him get to free agency. Because I don't think they're going to franchise him. Now, I could be wrong. The linebacker number might be much lower. I don't know off the top of my head. But even then, I think it's unlikely. I think more than likely at that point, the Browns will say, JOK, go get your best offer and we'll match it or we won't. But I think ultimately JOK really wants to stay in Cleveland. I think JOK really likes what he's a part of as a leader on this team and everything with the success. So I think my expectation of this conversation is we both want this thing to work out. We just got to get the numbers right. And maybe that takes waiting a while to get there. But and maybe that's a conversation that's being had, that Andrew Berry is saying, look, we want to see this before he can commit that money. So we'll see where we go. But that could be informed by some other things that are going on the team, because because JOK may not be the only person they want to see more out of. For example, if the Browns feel really good about Cedric Tillman and feel really good about Elijah Moore, and they go, well, we're a little bit more comfortable with the idea of letting Amari go, then they got potentially more money to operate and get JOK signed to a deal for long-term planning purposes. But I think it will get done. But again, I think it's going to be into the season. Now, I could be pleasantly surprised. Maybe in camp they'll decide we've seen enough, but I don't foresee this getting worked out as early as maybe some people would like, and it's going to be a question throughout the season.
Yeah, it feels like it's trending that way. That they're just kind of there's a little bit of a disconnect there. They're too far apart. And it actually wrote long time ago that I thought that they would kind of for a different reason, wrote Pete in Things I Think I Know article a couple times that I thought they would want to see more of JOK just because of his injury riddled kind of average second year, that teams don't want to pay a guy after one breakout year often. So maybe they want to see a little bit more into this year, and that it would be very similar to the Delpit deal. Now it feels like, yeah, it might be, but for different reasons a little bit, because like you said, the 71% of the snaps, he wants to be paid like a guy that plays every snap, but you got to go prove that first if you're going to ask for that kind of money, especially at linebacker, right?
Right. The Browns have not put a priority on linebacker, which is smart. JOK has proven he's an impact player, which is why you're willing to pay him. Otherwise,
yeah, he's special.
Because linebackers are easily replaceable for the most part. The other question you have with JOK is just his style of play is so predicated on speed. So if he sustains like an ankle injury or something, is his effectiveness going to be sapped to the point where now he can't be that player going forward? And those are concerns that I think aren't unreasonable. If he sustains anything lower body, is that going to sort of sap his effectiveness? Is he going to lose something as a result of that? So I think both sides are going to sort of wait and see on this. JOK, hopefully for his sake, is hoping to prove that he does deserve at least Patrick Queen money, if not more than that, whatever it is. But obviously he's had a monster season this past year, has sort of proven his ability to make an impact. I think it's understandable that the Browns want to see him repeat it or be better and see him play more snaps.
Yeah, absolutely. Feels like it's going that way. And the nice thing about JOK is he hasn't made a fuss about it. He has said his focus is on playing football this year. So, it doesn't feel like there's any, controversy there, or anybody's disgruntled, like you said about Cooper, which was what people were kind of labeling him, but there was no evidence of that. Right. So
he's not stupid. He could say, I want to trade, and Andrew Brady's could be like, okay, no, go back to practice. Yeah. I think this is one of those things where they can sort of play this out and go, this would not end well. The Browns are going to say no, and we're going to move on. So even if JOK is sort of privately unhappy, and I'm not going to assume he is, all he can do is go out there and be great to finish out his rookie contract. And if he is great, he's going to be in a position to get more money than he otherwise would. So, again, the Browns have another player who is incentivized to be as great as possible to maximize his earning power and earn that contract.
Big relief, all in all today, as Cooper, reports to camp. It's impactful that he will be there for the first days all the way through camp to work with Watson and in this new offense. That is a significant part of this as well. Certainly, missing any of that time would have not been good. Ultimately, as they try to, install this whatever this offense is going to look like, the Dorsey hybrid, offense here that we're kind of expecting.
Yeah, I mean, it's all there for you. It's all focused on how to build this thing, how to get the most out of Deshaun Watson. Everything fits and works. And now really the more of the focus beyond, if there's a question at this point offensively, it's more along the lines of offensive tackle and then Nick Chubb. Like those are sort of where we're at with this, which is fine. Like those are reasonable questions. And this is one that you can sort of knock out, not have to think about. And hopefully the Browns passing game is everything they envisioned to be. Plenty of weapons with all the receivers, David Njoku, even some of the running backs that they have. There's a lot of opportunity for them to get good. So now there's nothing in the way of sort of seeing everything work.
Yeah, absolutely. You're watching the React. Browns training camp will really get underway tomorrow. Players reported Amari Cooper signs a deal he restructures his deal of $20 million to guarantee it, gets $10 million up front and $5 million added on in potential quote unquote earnable incentives, which they do have to classify. Because I think then it does count against the cap if they are deemed earnable. And that's how that works out for him. We kind of rehashed the situation with JOK too. So we're going to get into some videos now because that's what we do here on the React. Appreciate you guys all in the chat contributing. I've been reading all of your comments here. We're going to get into some more stuff here, but hit like, hit subscribe. If you're on Twitter, hop on over to youtube.com/Orange and Brown Report and just take a second to hit like and subscribe. It helps us out immensely and it doesn't cost you a thing. So do that for us. As we start to ramp this thing up, camp's underway. I'm fired up about it. We're going to watch this first video here, which will sound very familiar to the man next to me a little bit here from the PFF guys talking about the Browns offensive line as they were doing their offensive line rankings on the PFF show. So
I hope Casey Kinnaman is paying attention.
Yes, me too. I hope so too. I'm going to send it to him anyways. Make sure he watches it.
About the Jets, like I said about the Bengals, the fact that the Bengals have a first-round offensive tackle who is not starting or not needed to start. The Jets have that with Olu-Fashanu, and then the number 4 team, the Cleveland Browns, the fact that they have 3 starting caliber tackles. Jedrick Wills at left tackle, Jack Conklin coming back off injury, potentially playing right tackle, with DeJuan Jones, who filled in at right tackle last year and was excellent as a rookie, especially a mid-round rookie. The depth that the Browns have, I mean, they've been a top 5 offensive line for a while here, and then you throw in one of the best interior groups, Joel Bitonio at left guard, Ethan Pocic at center, and Wyatt Teller at right guard. The Browns have depth, and they have just a good group of starters as well.
Yeah, I think this is a top 3 offensive line. I mean, Jack Conklin is a top-level player. I would like to see them give DeJuan Jones a chance to unseat Jedrick Wills at left tackle, honestly. Like, DeJuan Jones showed last year that he should be playing, and he's not, because I think the best of the 3 right now is Jack Conklin. And when he's healthy, it makes sense to give him, he didn't lose his starting job by getting injured, right? So I think it makes sense to keep him as the right tackle. But that leaves DeJuan Jones, who showed last year that he could be really good, sitting on the bench because you don't want to move him to the other side. I would give him a shot. And okay, maybe it might not work, right? You might go through training camp or preseason or whatever and go, that guy is a train wreck at left tackle. He can only play right tackle. Forget it. Move him back there. Fine. Put him on the bench. But Jedrick Wills is underachieved as a first round, as the answer at left tackle. I don't think he's a long-term answer for them at left tackle, at which point I would see if DeJuan Jones can do that. I mean, Chris Collinsworth on the draft show last year was like, I think DeJuan Jones can be a left tackle. So we discovered last year he's already an NFL caliber player. He showed that. He's better than a lot of people expected him to be. He slipped in the draft for whatever reason, but he already exceeded those expectations. So let's see if he can defy expectations again and give him a shot to win the left tackle job. Because if DeJuan Jones is an upgrade over Wills at left tackle, I mean, this might be the best offensive line in the NFL at that point, because you've got, I think, the best guard tandem in the NFL. Ethan Pochich at center is good. Jack Conklin is better than good at right tackle. And then you've just got Jedrick Wills at left tackle who could be upgraded upon. I mean, I would give that a shot to happen.
All right. The one thing I would question here, and certainly let me ask you this, and I know you've said almost very much that message for a long time, right? And we've talked about this a lot. And we both want to see him take reps at left tackle because it gives them more options. And but he talks about Conklin like it's a sure thing he's gonna be Jack Conklin of a couple of years ago, right? When he was healthy. And I don't know if that's a sure thing. That's something that like I think if he is healthy, Pete, and he is full, Jack Conklin. I mean, what is he, 29, 30 now?
Mm-hmm.
I think that he's just taken such a beating the past few years and had these kind of injuries that could diminish what he was at one point. Like, you kind of need to see him return to that level of play, or maybe he isn't your best tackle. I think if he does do that, he clearly is. He's proven that in the past. But there is some question to whether he returns to that level, right?
I think it's reasonable to wonder. Certainly, he has to go out there and prove it. I don't think you can just go on. You can just take it on. You can just assume it. I don't think you can just take his word for it. But I think again, we talked about this. Him declaring himself ready to go, to me, was a very big deal. That it wasn't, well, he's going into August. He's got to get in there if he's going to do something, or otherwise it's going to be sort of a lost situation for him. They're just going to have to roll with DeJuan Jones at that point. He declared himself ready to go. And I don't take that lightly from him for a guy who doesn't talk. Like, he does not have a big social media presence. He isn't a guy who's likely to spout off. So I take that to mean something important. Now we've got to see what happens when he gets back in there and reps and everything else, but he is a right tackle only. Like, he's been in the league for 8 years, playing right tackle. There are no left tackle reps. Like, there's no sense in that at this point.
He's not going to be a swing tackle if you put him on the bench, basically, right? Yeah.
I suppose if the knee were to suggest that, like, he's better switching sides because, like, it's diminished enough that, like, it puts him at a disadvantage on the right side, maybe there's a world where that happens. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's going to be the starting right tackle, and all of a sudden you've got this fantastic opportunity to find out just what DeJuan Jones can do. DeJuan Jones was a excellent pass protector right out of the gate. That is valuable anywhere on the offensive line. And if he can do it at left tackle, it's really valuable and sets them up, because the thing that, like, if Jack Conklin is Jack Conklin, he can stay healthy, the Browns can just keep him. He's under contract for more years after this, which is sort of unfortunate given the injury he suffered. But, like, if he's good again, nobody's going to care at that point. If he has a great year or a good year, let's say he's just an above average right tackle, nobody's going to sit there and complain about his contract anymore if he stays and plays the whole thing. And they'll just be like, all right, he's our right tackle again in 2025. It's all about finding out a real answer at left tackle. And if that's the case, then the Browns don't have to go searching for one this offseason or be in an awkward situation where they're extending Jedrick Wills and no one feels good about it, because that is absolutely, unless Jedrick Wills is a revelation this year, if there's a point where that extension is announced, no one's going to feel good about it. Everybody's going to be like, okay, yeah, they need a left tackle. We sort of got to do this. But nobody's going to be like, yeah, more Jed Wills. We've really, we've extended a key piece of our offense. It's just not going to happen. You're not going to find that. And you want to be like, if JOK gets an extension signed, universally, people are going to be happy. Now, they may question the money involved depending on where it lands, but everybody's going to be really happy about X more years of JOK. Nobody's going to be like, man, this really sucks. I hate watching JOK play football.
Right.
Jedrick Wills, there are people who are going to be like, I hate this move.
The opposite. Yes.
And I'm probably going to be one of them. Just, you don't feel confident. You're sort of like, man, I hope it works. There are times where he looks fine, and then there are games where it looks like he's just completely disinterested or distracted or whatever, and you're just like, this sucks. So I am all for finding out just what DeJuan Jones can do. I don't buy the idea that he can't do it. Like,
I agree.
It's just figuring out the footwork and getting an endless amount of reps at it. And when the Browns drafted him, that's the first thing they did with him in rookie camp was put him in a left-handed stance and have Bill Callahan work with him. Now, so he's done it. Now, is he great at it? Probably not. That's why he was at right tackle. But I continue to believe that if Jedrick Wills was the one who got rolled up on week one and Jack Conklin kept playing, maybe it doesn't happen right away. But I suspect DeJuan Jones was getting a bit left tackle at some point.
That's interesting. I never even thought about it like that. Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah. I think he can do it too. And you have to be thinking like, my thought immediately goes to their first round pick next year, right? Like you get this first round pick back. You don't, you have this Amari Cooper stuff, which now, his future hangs in the balance somewhat, and you don't have a left tackle. So you're kind of like, hey, you don't really want to pigeonhole yourself into having to draft a wide receiver in the first round because you need a wide receiver one of the future. It'd be nice if you could, right? Or the guy somebody fell in your lap or whatever. But the same thing at tackle, right? And so you have to explore all options to try to avoid that, or going out, which Andrew Berry won't do, going out on the free agent market and overpaying for. I mean, you might as well just sign an extension, right?
Right.
At that point. So they've got to explore all options, it feels like.
They sure do.
Here we go.
The one interesting thing about DeJuan Jones at 6'8", 370 plus or whatever he is, he did not play like this mauling right tackle. I think the lack of foot speed and ability to move actually affected him quite a bit in the run game. You see that discrepancy in his pass blocking versus run blocking grades. He was excellent in games going head-to-head with TJ Watt. I mean, he is really difficult to get around. You can't bull rush him.
Right.
And he's athletic enough to just always be in position that you can't get around him, right? I mean, DeJuan Jones, I don't know whether it's left tackle or right tackle, I think will be okay in pass protection. My question is actually the run game for a guy that on paper, again, you'd be like, oh, he's 6'8", 370. He's a road grader. And he's actually not at the moment because I think the lack of athleticism has caught up so far. So as he's growing into that, he has a chance to become a really good player. And I think that, again, that's why. And Jack Conklin, even at this point in his career, I think is still a viable starting right tackle when he's healthy. And that's why the Browns are so high here. And you actually want to put them even higher because of some of this depth here.
Yeah. I mean, this is a really good offensive line. I think definitely one of the best in the NFL and a strength of this team.
It was as if I wrote this. If PFF said to me, what's the deal with the situation at right tackle? And they tag teamed it beautifully because, that's my whole issue with it. DeJuan Jones sucked as a run blocker as a rookie, and maybe he will get better in terms of angles and trying to understand how he can sort of negate some of the supreme athleticism he's going to see. But ultimately, pass protection is super valuable everywhere. Run blocking is not, you cannot just have awful right tackle play if your offense is geared to run right, and the Browns are geared to run right. Doesn't mean they can't run left, but Wyatt Teller on the right side is perfectly cast as the prototypical right guard. Joe Bitonio is perfectly cast as a left guard. Those guys block down. Bitonio can pull. Ethan Posick, not a great puller, but he can theoretically do it. I want DeJuan Jones being involved as a run blocker. I should say the focal point of the running game as little as possible for the time being. Maybe he will be great at it. But if he's great at it left tackle, great. Jack Conklin is an excellent run blocker or has been to this point. And the Browns were at their best when they had Jack Conklin over there with Wyatt Teller in 2020 in those years where he made all pro. Like that would immensely improve this offense. We saw it against the Ravens. James Hudson, the fourth or third or whatever he is, not a good player. But he was dominant. Like he was a game changer against the Ravens because he was able to get off the block or get off the snap and block people down the field. And Jerome Ford had 120 something yards and like almost, I think 80% of it was running to the right. And it changed the game to the point where now at the end of the game, you see freaking Hudson rolling over dudes, getting up, and him and Wyatt Teller celebrating like they're a wrestling tag team. Like, yeah, I want to be able to get off the ball and run block that way and be able to function the offense in a way that makes sense and to be able to play action off of that effectively. DeJuan Jones is great as a pass protector, super valuable, but it is so frustrating to be able to look at it and go, well, we aren't really equipped to run to that side as well as we'd like to be, and we're sort of diminished.
Why do you think that is with him? What does he is it I mean, he's so athletic, you would think that he would be able to do it. Well, what does he struggle with the most, or why is he unable to be effective in that part of his game so far?
Well, he's explosive. So in other words, he can run fast and he can, do the jumps and stuff, which is all going forward, which is great. And if the Browns down block with him quite a bit, that's great. He's not going to be great at wide zone type stuff where you're asking him to go out in space and try to pick up a moving target. And just going from college to NFL, some of the guys he's going to try to down block have better answers for being able to deal with that, or duos and some of these other things. But I think part of this comes down to how the Browns want to structure their offense to sort of limit the exposure somebody like DeJuan Jones has. And he will figure out some tricks and some other stuff, but he's never going to be a nimble guy. I mean, just by nature of how big he is, he's always going to be a sort of lean on the opponent type blocker, as opposed to a mauler and a guy who can just go find dudes in the middle field and just kill them. I just don't see it. And he was a good run blocker at Ohio State, but he could engulf people. And hopefully that's what they do. But it's going to be difficult for him to, particularly with some of these nimble interior players, the dude from the Jets, Q, is just too nimble for DeJuan Jones to get around. He will have answers, or an Aaron Donald, obviously retired at this point. Those guys have so much athleticism that you can't just count on the fact that DeJuan Jones can just work downhill and he's going to naturally get them. They have more answers. And hopefully, as he practices and gets more comfortable, he will get sort of more tools and more answers to deal with certain situations. But I think it's just going to be tricky for him, or I should say, not something I want to bet on. I want him to prove that he can do it. That'd be great. But I don't want to go into the season going, man, I sure hope DeJuan Jones can be a good run blocker this year, or it's going to hurt the Browns. I think that's ultimately why Jack Conklin, healthy, has the edge to easily win that job. He's a ever so slightly worse pass protector than DeJuan Jones was as a rookie. He is immensely better as a run blocker. It's not even close. And as Sam pointed out, Jack Conklin, healthy, is the best tackle on this team. It's not close. So now DeJuan Jones gets this opportunity to be super valuable, opportunity to see if he can be a left tackle. And if he can, then you've got a really good left tackle for super cheap for a couple of years. As you try to continue to find answers you're going to have to then find, for a couple of years down the road, you're going to need for depth, but down the road to eventually replace Jack Conklin. You're going to have a little bit more freedom to find the other, eventual guard replacement, if that's the way they're looking at this, to take the financial burden off the line and just get younger. That is something they need to be looking at, and then allow themselves to spend money on those receivers and defensive linemen and corners and some of these other contracts that can come up. JOK, Martin Emerson, these are decisions that you're going to want them to be able to make, and it won't happen if they're paying, $16 million per year or whatever it is at that point for Wyatt Teller and Joe Bitonio. Now it's possible that Teller will be good enough that you're we want to extend him again. And if he is, great. But if they get Zach Sinter, and Zach Sinter is really good, if they get somebody else and they're really good, and you've got DeJuan Jones and Luke Whippler proves he can be a center, then all of a sudden you're paying practically nothing for these guys, and you can use that money elsewhere so that you don't have 5 linemen all making real money on your cap. That's just an insane amount in addition to the quarterback and everybody else.
Yeah. And it's been like that for years. They've just sunk money into that offensive line and sunk money into the offensive line, and for good reason. But at some point, they have to make that transition, to your point. Question here, or comment from James. I heard he has a hard time getting low, like because he's so tall. Is there something to that?
Well, I mean, being naturally low helps, but I mean, ultimately it's about bending. And I think being 370 pounds or whatever it
Yeah.
is always going to sort of be tricky. But, you know, Jonathan Ogden was All of Famer and he was 6'9". Like there are examples of guys who have been super tall and still super effective, able to bend, to win with leverage and do those types of things. He may not be equipped for that, and that may be something that he's always going to sort of lose that battle. But there are definitely guys who have done it in the past and been able to excel in that role. So, you know, maybe that's his deal, and he's always going to be limited. But if he is, and he can excel as a pass protector, I want him on the left.
Yeah. It's not his feet though, right? Like he has pretty quick feet for his size, right? From the basketball and stuff. I mean, it feels like it's something that he should be able. I guess I'm just saying it feels like it's something. It feels like it's something he should be able to grow into a little bit.
Again, I think there's some physical improvement he can make. But I think it's mostly technique and just coming up with answers, because he never was going to be a guy that excelled at things like the 3-cone to measure your hip flexibility or the shuttle. I don't think he was going to like shock you with some great shuttle time that suggested he could slide in and out. I think he's always good. His explosiveness is what allows him to be a starting caliber tackle. The fact that he is that fast in a straight line, the fact that he has that ability to generate that much power, and then just how wide he is and his length that he can sort of engulf people and take over. But I think I'm hoping he can figure it out and become a better run blocker. But I think it's always going to be I think he's always going to be limited in that respect. And, you know, I think that's part of the reason he ultimately, I know what, you know, he was sort of labeled a late first, early second round pick initially based on talent. I think part of the reason he was there was because there was some expectation that he was going to have some trouble, but being excelling in pass protection is worth it on its own.
Yeah, that's interesting though. Okay, excellent. You guys are watching the React with Pete Smith. My name is Brad Ward. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button down below. It just takes you a minute. We appreciate your participation in the chat. We're going to move on to the next video here. I know I'm going to butcher this name. Now, this video is from a person named Joey Riccatone. Yeah, we'll go with that. Riccatone. And it's kind of on the before we get into it, I'll kind of ask you a little bit about some of this. Like, for example, I mean, he's going to talk about PFF and Bleacher Report and some of this stuff, and we'll react to that as we will. But Pete, everywhere nationally, people are picking the Browns to finish fourth in the AFC North. And like just Colin Cowherd today, you know, with his, I mean, it was ridiculous. He used this excuse that they picked the Bengals second, and he was like, the Bengals won, you know, with Jake Browning last year, but, you know, then he turned around and put the Browns in last. Like, you know, how ironic and ignorant and whatever. But I don't know. He admitted it was the best division, but picked the Steelers to finish ahead of them. And some other people in the country are doing that. Why do you think that is? Is it just Watson?
I think they look at, well, one, they look at the quarterbacks, and that's not a bad way to bet. Historically, 5 of the last 6 division winners are either the Ravens or the Bengals. They have Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow. So history would, as your guide, if you're saying those guys are healthy, then it's very easy for you to say, hey, the quarterback can fix everything else, because oftentimes they can. The Steelers get some Mike Tomlin bump every year, and seemingly deservedly, because he's never had a losing season, although I don't think that's enough. So when you get to the Browns, 1, it's Deshaun Watson. And then 2, it's because they don't look at the actual roster of the team. They just look at the big thing. Is Nick Chubb going to be healthy this year? I don't know. The Browns had a whole lot of injuries on the offensive line. Are those guys to be right? I don't know. And Deshaun Watson wasn't good. So 4th place. Or you'll sort of get that thing where defense is volatile, which it is. I don't disagree with that. But even if you believe that, and you're saying the Browns aren't going to be number one, which I've said, I think it's going to be really difficult for them to be number one again. That doesn't mean they're going to suddenly fall off a cliff. I don't expect them, I don't see, short of catastrophic injury, namely to Myles Garrett, where the Browns are suddenly 15th in defense. I think they're still going to be top 10. They're still going to be right there in the mix as one of the better defenses in the league. So you don't need a ton from that side of the ball. You just need the offense to be able to function, which they did. And then the last reason that a lot of people think the Browns are going to finish last is they go, well, Joe Flacco is better than Deshaun Watson. Debatable. And then go, well, and they don't have him anymore, so they're going to suck. They don't care that the Browns were 4-1 with Deshaun Watson, or that his record, for as badly as he's played, something like 8-4, I think, overall. So it's very easy to land on and sit there and go, we're going to put the Browns on last. There is still some carryover to Watson's baggage, that it's a safe way to say we're going to pick them to finish last, so you avoid any potential, blowback, even though I don't know that there's that much to be had anymore. But I do think there's a little element of, I don't want to put the Browns high. And so, and ultimately, I don't care. Like, I think there is a world where the Browns can finish fourth just by nature of how good the division is. But I think they're going to be better than that, and they can go out and prove it. Now, Kevin Stefanski gets to roll in every day with the biggest smile on his face going, man, I got all kinds of bulletin board material to get these fired up, and all these people who think they're going to suck. Telling you, hey, you're a fourth place team, or you're going to fall apart, or the defense, like, they get to, it's sort of like when Georgia was going for their second national championship, and they came in and somehow convinced the team that everybody was picking them to suck when everybody was picking them to win the national championship again. They don't even need to contrive the motivation for the Browns. There are plenty of people giving them all the motivation in the world, saying they're going to suck. And so far, hopefully it stays this way, the Browns internalize it without feeling like they need to tell everybody about it, and just go out and handle their business. And it starts week one. We will suddenly hear everybody start changing their tune if the Browns go out and, beat the crap out of the Cowboys week one and make a big statement. So I think the Browns are going to play up that huge to make a big statement at home week one, and sort of be able to, stick it in everybody's face who bet against them, and go, talk about the Cowboys and how they suck again, because that will inevitably be the next news cycle. But I don't get too caught up in it. I expect it at this point, but it's so surface level, because I think the Browns roster, two people are honest with it, is very, very good. And even like PFF and stuff will tell you it's very good, even if they have concerns about quarterback, and may hurt them as a result, because quarterback is just such a impactful position.
Yeah, that's the and ultimately you're right. I mean, that's where we want them to be ranked by everybody, right? That's ideally where you want to be, kind of laying in the weeds. But it's interesting that they do, sites like PFF do put them in their like top 5 most talented rosters, but other sites, just their other pundits, just ignore it. All right. Here we go. Next video here from Joey Riccatone.
Few weeks, the NFL prediction train has been rolling at full steam ahead, and many of the industry's top outlets and talking heads are sharing one thing in common. They are discounting the Cleveland Browns. The main culprits this week are PFF and Bleacher Report. So, PFF's defensive line rankings for the 2024 season. I'm sure that you've seen a lot of posts like this on Twitter and Instagram basically every day for the past few weeks as they're hyping up the 2024 year. I think the general consensus has been, why the hell are the Jets get so high on all of these lists? Are the Browns really only the 5th best defensive line in the NFL? How's that possible? They have the best player. They have the highest graded single season player in Myles Garrett with a 94 grade last season. PFF has claimed that this ranking is based upon the following: the talent and depth at each position, including 3-4 outside linebackers as edge rushers, and therefore part of the defensive line for the purposes of this article. What I did was I went through all 5 of these units, every defensive lineman listed in PFF's database who had a 2023 grade, took their grades and then averaged it out to see what the average grade per player is in the units. Therefore, the highest grade should give you the highest average graded player, which should give you the order of the best teams from 1 to 5. This method shows the top 5 teams from 1 to 5 as the following: the Eagles with a 66.4 average grade, the Lions with a 64.2, the Browns with a 64.2, the 49ers with a 60.4, and the Jets with a 58 overall grade. Of course, this method is flawed because it's taking everyone in that unit. Some of these teams have 12 guys with grades, some only have 8. So what I did was take the top 8 from each unit. And again, this is PFF's own data. The results were the Eagles, number 1 with a 74.8 grade. Then the Browns, second with a 72.3 grade. Then the Lions with a 69.8 grade. Then the Jets at 4 with a 68.1 grade. And then the 49ers 5th with a 67 overall grade. That is almost the complete reverse of the order that they presented to the public with their rankings. How can a company...
Tell me why it is, Pete. I know you already told me. Tell the people why this is.
Okay, so this is really funny. I've never really seen his videos, so I don't know. Is this the aesthetic he always has? Because it feels like he's like an expose, like he's CoffeeZilla or something, like really getting deep down to unfurl this grand conspiracy.
Yeah.
So there's a couple problems. One, PFF will factor in age, and even Browns fans will acknowledge that like there's a little bit of concern that like, hey, the Browns have a whole lot of guys who are about to be 30 or are in their 30s. Are they all going to fall off? The other part, which just the way he's mathing this, equates a guy who played 1,000 snaps the same as somebody played 200 snaps. So like Maurice Hurst,
think of that. Yeah.
Maurice Hurst played 302 snaps on defense. He had a really high PFF grade. Yeah, that's good. He had a really impactful year, but like Myles Garrett played, however many more snaps than he did. Or let's use Max Crosby as an example, not in the AFC North, who plays like 99% of snaps. His thing has to be weighted to account for that. Like he's way more impactful as a result of that. Like you could have somebody with some really good PFF grades who doesn't play very much, and sample size is a factor. So you sort of have to find a way to normalize this. I do again, they're in the top 5. I'm good with it. Like at that point, are we really that worried about it? Cool. Like it to his credit, it's like a cool idea for a video to like be able to go into all these things. And he makes a well-reasoned, like a reasonable argument that somebody like, man, they are really screwing Cleveland. But they're still 5th. Like, how bad can it be to be 5th? They used to be in like the late teens with Myles Garrett and 3 guys named Fred up front. Like it's just, we get so deep in the weeds that like we want to contrive this thing that the Browns are somehow getting screwed. Like there are a lot of things that could like factor into this. So, using the Steelers as an example, Cameron Hayward is 35. Now, the way he trains is insane. And maybe you're not going to bet on him falling off, but at some point he's going to fall off. Do you would factor that into your ranking or not? If you're trying to just go off numbers, then okay, you can sort of look at this and do it this way. But I think if you're at least honest to yourself, you can't just go off numbers. You have to account for these other things that are going to impact it. But certainly age and sample size sort of get in the way of what is a really fun way to describe this. Yeah, I mean, that was what the Browns had for a minute there. particularly in the middle with the Maliks and then
The
Tommy
Maliks.
Togiai and whatever. So if the worst thing in the world that happens to the Browns season is that they're ranked 5th among defensive lines, and we just saw they were ranked 4th for the offensive line, the
good.
Browns will be fine. Like,
yeah,
there are worse crimes to be had. But I give him credit. The way he's selling this, I can't help but smile looking at this because of the way it's like being sold. Like, he's really like he's Dale Gribble or something, really getting to the bottom of this thing to sort of hash it out.
That's just headbutted my mic here. Okay. We're gonna push play here. This is it's an enjoyable video. Here you go.
Whose whole identity is based upon the idea of being objective and statistic based, present this kind of list. Meanwhile, the rhetoric is in full force, and they're putting the big market teams like the Jets and the 49ers up in the 1 and 2 spot. They place the Eagles in the 3rd to rage bait them, make them come at.
Rage bait them. That's terrific. I love that.
The Eagles do love to get frustrated, but here's the thing. Like, what fan base reacts to almost everything that's like contrived and negative? This one. Cleveland's notorious, which is why you get the Colin Cowherds of the world and all those people who will say awful things about the Browns because they know they're going to get all kinds of interaction. Browns fans cannot help themselves because they've got that little bit of a Napoleon complex with how they compare themselves to these larger markets. And they, oh man, now, after years of feeling they couldn't attract real talent, and that's why some people were so over the top for Odell Beckham and some of these other guys, Jarvis Landry, some of these guys. Now that the Browns have like established themselves as a real team, they're no longer begging people to come here. Cleveland looks like an attractive destination. You're getting less of that. So that's sort of, it just doesn't mean anything to me. Like, he comes up with a great story for this, but like the Jets defensive line is phenomenal. Like, legitimately great. Now they've got to sort that issue out with the dude they traded for from the Eagles. 49ers, I have questions. I still don't like Yetur Mato's gross. I've seen Jordan Elliott. I'm good. They're like, they have questions, but like Javon Hargrave is really good. Nick Bosa is really good. They've got really good players on that front. Eagles, really good players on that front with their 2 defensive tackles. And they just got the dude from the Jets in free agency that is Huff, who's you got to prove he's a full-time player, but is a phenomenal pass rusher. And the Detroit Lions added DJ Reader to a front with Aiden Hutchinson and Elaine McNeil and some of these other guys. Like, I'm fine. And the Browns finished ahead of the Cowboys. If there was ever a team to like go, hey, we're going to play to the hits or whatever, it would be Dallas, because they've got DeMarcus Lawrence. They've got Micah Parsons. Now their interior, I don't know about that. Odigizua is pretty good. Like, ultimately, this is done by a person who's ranking it by an opinion. And even when they do these shows, you'll hear, what did we hear from Steve Palazzolo when they broke down defensive lines? His argument was the Browns could be number 1. And I think at one point he says, I would put the Browns number 1 for A, B, and C. Ultimately, this is somebody's opinion based on the numbers, but I do not come up with the grand conspiracy that he does. But again, I applaud him for this because I give him all the credit in the world. He sells this very hard and goes at it. And again, the other thing, what the Browns aren't going to complain about? Being ahead of the Steelers down here. They're going to take that. So again,
and Ravens,
the worst thing in the world, they're going to take this and be fine with this. And, they can sit there and go Myles Garrett, Defensive Player of the Year. Now, unrelated, but still PFF. PFF has one guy from the Browns on PFF's top 50. If I was to make the case, I would sit there and go, Myles Garrett should have been MVP based on the fact that they had one guy in the top 50 players in the league and still won 11 games. So you can play with this a whole lot of ways and get upset when saying they're screwing these guys or that multiple Browns players should have been in the top 50. I would certainly argue that Denzel Ward should be. But
Yeah.
I can also flip and go, well, Myles Garrett should be the MVP of the league. I can't imagine anyone else who was MVP. I can't imagine that Lamar Jackson was the only one from the Ravens in there and he won MVP. Myles Garrett was so good that he carried apparently what was a mediocre roster to 11 wins and should win the MVP as a defensive end.
Remarkable. I mean, the Browns have to have a ton of guys then between 50 and 100. Maybe they don't. I don't know. It's interesting.
Not according to which is it Pete Prisco, who only had one
Yes.
Brown player on the whole top 100. So again, more argument. Myles Garrett, MVP of the league.
Gotta be. Let him do 11 wins, one player. All right, here we go.
Out and fight in the comments. And then the lower market teams, the Lions and the Browns in 4th and 5th. But now let's talk about coaching rankings. You would think that the guy who has won 2 out of 4 Coach of the Year awards in his 4-year career so far would be a top 10 coach. However, John Middlecoff on his podcast 3 and Out, which I love, I need to preface this and of course qualify all these statements. I think Middlecoff is amazing. I think 3 and Out is the best all-around NFL podcast on the internet. He made his list, the top 10 coaches he would take in order not named Andy Reid. So in this situation, Stefanski just needs to be viewed as a top 11 coach to make this list. However, you're going to see based on my analysis of his criteria and the people he chose that he should have been more in the mix. He should have been a lock for one of these spots.
I love a head coach who calls the plays and impacts the quarterback.
So here it is from 10 to 1. Sean McDermott.
He inherited a joke franchise. The Bills were a laughingstock when he showed up.
Mike Tomlin, Shane Steichen.
When I look at Shane Steichen, I go, he's everything I want in a coach. He's worked with every different style of starting quarterback.
Dan Campbell.
You think Sean McDermott inherited a shitty operation in Buffalo? It doesn't get any worse than Detroit. They hadn't been to the NFC Championship game since 1992.
DeMeco Ryans, Matt LaFleur, John Harbaugh, Jim Harbaugh, Sean McVay, and Kyle Shanahan. Look, I'm not delusional. I know that Dan Campbell has officially accomplished more. He made it to a conference title. Stefanski has only been as far as a divisional. And I know that DeMeco Ryans housed Cleveland in the playoffs last year. And even as a Browns fan, I can acknowledge the greatness in Mike Tomlin. However, a lot of people could make the argument that he inherited a lot of the pieces that he took to win a Super Bowl against Arizona and the organizational stability that the Steelers have basically always had. So a big part of the reason why Sean McDermott and Dan Campbell were on these lists, considering that they weren't quarterback guys, offensive coordinators who call the plays and lead the offense in a very offensive modern NFL, was that the situations they inherited were crazy, in disarray, disorganized. But if we're going to talk about disarray with the Bills and the Lions, why are we discounting the Browns, who is the media darling of disarray? Everyone loves to talk about how bad the Browns have been, how much of a dumpster fire their organization is. So let's get right down to the raw stats. Who inherited the worst situation? Campbell, McDermott, or Stefanski? I went into the 4 seasons before all of those coaches arrived to see what it was that they stepped into. The 4 years before the Bills hired Sean McDermott, between 2013 and 2016, they recorded the following records: 6-10, 9-7, 8-8, 7-9, for a total win-loss record of 30-34. Before the Lions hired Dan Campbell, in the period of 2017 to 2020, the Lions recorded the following records: 9-7, 6-10, 3-12-1, and 5-11, for a total win-loss record of 23-40. And now, before the Browns hired Kevin Stefanski, in the years ranging from 2016 to 2019, the Browns went 1-15, 0-16, 7-8-1, and 6-10, for an overall record of 14-49. 14-49. We also need to remember, McDermott, he had Tyrod Taylor in his first season, but then they drafted Josh Allen. Sean McDermott also has nothing to do with the offensive development of his team. Yes, there's a lot to do with the identity, and he's done a ton on the defense, but still, he didn't turn them into the offensive juggernaut that they have become with Josh Allen. Then with the Lions, Dan Campbell inherited Jared Goff, a guy who had already been to a Super Bowl and who is a better than average starter who knows how to lead a franchise. Kevin Stefanski inherited Baker Mayfield, who had not lived up to his hype outside of a pretty solid rookie season, but the guy was
Offensive
stepping
rookie of
into
the
his
year.
third
Settle
offensive
down.
coordinator in 3 seasons. Then the following year, Baker destroys his shoulder. Then he makes Jacoby Brissett look like a decent starter. And then we all know what he did last year with 5 different starting quarterbacks. And in all of that, he had his hand fully in the development and was calling the plays throughout all of this. This is why
All right. There's a lot there. So listen, based on the criteria of, and I'm not familiar with the podcast. Are you with the 3 and Out or
Not the podcast. I'm familiar with John Middlecoff.
okay? John Middlecoff, and I'm not familiar with the podcast, but yeah, and but based on his criteria that he named, Dan Campbell should not. First of all, I don't like Dan Campbell. I'm just gonna flat out say it. I don't think he's a very good coach. I think he's a meathead. I don't. But whatever. But to put him in front of Stefanski, I just find insane. He does nothing to this. To his point, I mean, the guy's criteria was, develop the offense and bring out great quarterback play. That's what Stefanski does. Literally, that's what he does best, right? I mean, I don't know.
Sure. So there's a lot. I think part of the reason Stefanski's such a good coach is because it felt like an easy lift. It doesn't feel like he turned around a dumpster fire for a lot of people. He just was that good that it's just like, yeah, the Browns are good now, or the Browns are functional now, or however you want to phrase it. Like,
yeah,
they went from Hugh Jackson to these other guys who could not coach to Kevin Stefanski, and immediately good. Immediately you had a guy who understands how this works, and that's why he's got 2 Coach of the Year awards. Part of the reason that Kevin Stefanski is low is because he doesn't have a big persona. Dan Campbell, who I have some of the same issues you do, but I can't deny what Detroit is doing.
sure.
Persona counts. Like, you can, if you are anyone in the NFL who follows the NFL, you can think of a Dan Campbell like comment or just how he is. Kevin Stefanski, and intentionally, is very anonymous. I think Matt LaFleur is as well, but Matt LaFleur is on that list, and deservedly so, with what he's been able to do with Jordan Love and all these other things. I hate the argument that Sean McDermott gets no credit for the offense. He's the head coach, and I would argue one of the greatest quarterback developers of all time is Marty Schottenheimer, who did not coach offense. Marty Schottenheimer was phenomenal with developing quarterbacks, even though he was a defensive coach. Drew Brees credits Marty Schottenheimer with benching him and getting him to sit him down and figure these things out. And Drew Brees, obviously, is a Hall of Fame quarterback. He was great with Kosar. He's been great with quarterbacks everywhere he's gone. The knock on Marty Schottenheimer is not the quarterback. It's, not getting it done in the playoffs. As a defensive coach, one of the best ever, will never get enough credit for it. So I don't care about that. But ultimately, Joey, I'm going to say it's Riccatoni, should beat up John Middlecoff. That's fine. I'm good with that. Go beat him up. I don't know if there's a stipulation that Andy Reid's not allowed on this list if it's top 10 guys not named Andy Reid, because Andy Reid I don't think was on his list. But ultimately, again, there are plenty of top 10 lists where I can find Kevin Stefanski in terms of head coaching. So again, I'm not that worried about it. But a lot of the guys ahead of him have hardware. The one I have an issue with, the one I find annoying, is Jim Harbaugh. Not that he wasn't a great coach, not that he didn't go to the Super Bowl, but he's been out of the NFL quite a while. He's got to go prove it. And we were just saying he's number 3. That I have a problem with. I don't have a problem with anyone else. I don't really care. They've at least coached in the NFL recently. It's been a long time since Harbaugh was in the league. And I expect they will be good. But does that make him a top 3 coach in the league? I don't see it.
No.
I think that's fine. He can call his shot, and maybe he's in the camp that is one of these people who thinks the Chargers are going to be in the playoffs this year, and the Chargers are going to be in the Super Bowl in 2 years or whatever else, because apparently Patrick Mahomes died. That is fine. I'm not going to make that bet. But again, if Kevin Stefanski's 11th, I'm not going to lose sleep over it. The Browns have a really good head coach, period. I'm good with that. And he's going to get hurt a little bit by the fact he just needs to achieve more in the postseason. He's going to be hurt by the fact that people don't know who he is for the most part, unless you are here. He's arguably the most anonymous head coach in the league, him and Matt LaFleur. And Matt LaFleur has more exposure in the postseason. That these things don't concern me. I am fine with Kevin Stefanski continuing to be underrated, if that's what we want to call it. I think he's way better than a lot of people, but like right now, he's the third best coach in the AFC North, and that's just because it's really hard to be in the AFC North with the guys they have, because the two guys ahead of them have rings. So I think the Browns have their head coach for a long time, and I've been on this basically since he was brought in, and people have fought. Like, as much as like Joey's right and that or has a good case, certainly a better case than he does against PFF. Like, this is a good. He's on solid ground to make this argument. There are any number of people in Cleveland who don't believe Kevin Stefanski's good. So
there's a lot, actually.
And that's fine. I mean, they're wrong and largely uninformed, but they still exist. So it's hard for me to get that worked up when, to this point, there are people still hoping that Kevin Stefanski get fired, because God only knows who's going to get hired next is going to be the real next guy. And it's probably somebody that already has a job elsewhere, or some college coach that's completely ill-equipped for the job. But either way, we are still in this mold where you don't even have unified support behind Kevin Stefanski in Cleveland, let alone the league. So it's fine.
Yeah. Fumble makes an excellent point here. All this video proves is that stats can show whatever you want them to show if you manipulate them. I think that's a fair comment.
Largely, but again, I think one of the biggest credits to Kevin Stefanski is and I'm sure part of this is being held against him, is Deshaun Watson, but ultimately, I think the miraculous turnaround from Browns being dumpster fire, as he rightly points out, and there's some people think that because of Deshaun Watson, but they're really good. They do so much right day in and day out, and Kevin Stefanski is just a huge part of that they were able to have the season they had this past year, and it doesn't feel like miraculous. And that's part of the reason I think the fact that people don't like Kevin Stefanski in Cleveland, at least some of them, is a testament to just how good he is, because he did it so easily that people are sitting there going, man, he's still not very good. He still hasn't done A, B, and C. To the fact that you can literally compare him, basically make him into Vince Lombardi relative to what the Browns have had at this position, or Marvin Lewis with the Bengals for years and years, when you had the Mike Shula and Bruce Coslett and Dick LeBeau's of the world. Like, the Browns had that, just so many bad coaches, you can't remember them all. And Kevin Stefanski almost immediately has made everybody forget about them, and now sitting there going, well, the next hire is going to be the real hire. Like, that's how good he has been.
Yeah, it's a great point. That's said it perfectly. All right, let's continue on here.
Get so bothered with people wanting to fire Stefanski. Are you forgetting where the Browns were just 4 seasons before he showed up, 3 seasons before he showed up? This was the biggest laughingstock in the league by far. And I think that even the media, the informed media, people like John Middlecoff, who was an NFL scout, forget how bad they were. They were much, much, much worse than Detroit and Buffalo. For our final topic of the day, we are going to look at an extremely misinformed and uneducated piece of journalism. We have the great and powerful Bleacher Report giving their picks on who will finish last in every division. So who do you think they picked to finish last in the AFC North? The Browns, of course. But what is the rationale behind this genius pick? You can bet that they ignored that, yes, Cleveland has the reigning coach of the year, defensive player of the year, assistant coach of the year. They instead stayed with the usual. Deshaun Watson hasn't looked the same since 2020. When are people going to understand that that is an irrelevant knock against Cleveland and more of a supporting fact that they are a great team? They haven't had outstanding quarterback play at any point. And if you think that Joe Flacco had outstanding quarterback play last season, you're sorely mistaken. Love Flacco. Last season was a blast. That was not high-end quarterback play. But here are the facts before we divert too much. Deshaun Watson was 5-1 as a starter last year. If you don't want to count Indianapolis, which I wouldn't, he was 4-1. The defense was top 3. They had 3 major injuries to their offensive line, and they played without Nick Chubb from week 3 and on. Meanwhile, the author of this article's argument is, with Watson under center, Cleveland has operated a run-heavy offense. What does that have anything to do with the Browns being the worst team in their division? The Ravens and the 49ers passed the ball the least out of any teams in the NFL and both finished number 1 in their conferences. He follows that up, that Watson in a run-heavy scheme is problematic because the Browns haven't given a timetable for running back Nick Chubb's return. Once again, the Browns won 10 games without Nick Chubb last year. He follows that up by saying, the Browns may have to rely heavily on Watson to play like the Texans' version of himself in the upcoming season, which may be troublesome for this offense. So I guess the logic is this. Hey, remember the 2 biggest names that you played the majority of last season without? And who you won the bulk of your games last season without? They're going to cause you to lose more games than you did last year because they're going to return at some point this season. You may think that I'm pulling these quotes out of context, but listen to how he finishes his rationale up. When you bundle Watson's inefficiencies with Chubb's questionable status and 3 offensive tackles coming off season-ending injuries, anyone could understand why Cleveland could take a step back in 2024. That's an astounding way to frame this, when instead you could say this. With Deshaun Watson returning from injury after going 5-1 as a starter last season, and the return of Pro Bowl running back Nick Chubb, who was injured in week 2, as well as their 3 offensive tackles who they played the bulk of their season without, and a second season under award-winning Jim Schwartz, you could see why the Browns could win the AFC North. It is very easy to make that argument, but it is even easier to make lazy arguments like this guy is making on Bleacher Report. Regardless, people are just going to continue to discount the Browns, like I mentioned, and everyone always mentions in the comments they're better when they're underdogs. I believe that to be true, but it is just so infuriating when this stuff tries to get shoved down your throat that the team just isn't that good. And the same talking points over and over of, Watson hasn't looked the same since 2020. He's going to need to be the same for them to be a playoff team. No, they're not. They did it last year with him only playing 6 games, and we saw what they did. They did it without Nick Chubb. They did it without Jack Conklin. They did it without Jedrick Wills for a long period, and they did it at the end of the season without DeJuan Jones. They did it with injuries to Grant Delpit, to Denzel Ward for some moments in the year. So again, with all of those pieces returning, with all of the signings and the draft picks that they've brought in, are we seriously still going to keep pointing to one guy being the whole reason for why a team isn't going to succeed in Deshaun Watson? Deshaun Watson does not have to be an all-star for this team to make the playoffs. To win a Super Bowl, he's going to have to turn it on, without a doubt. But this idea that they're going to be last in their division is asinine, and it is purely based on people being lazy and ill-informed on what this team is and what they constitute and what their coaching staff has done and has been awarded for doing. If you're putting out this garbage, you better know that people and psychopaths like me are scouring the internet and collecting receipts. If I am wrong, I will be the first to admit it. If this was 2015, 2016, 2017, I wouldn't have been on here saying that the Browns are going to be good. The Browns are going to be good. I'm a realistic person. I have not been confident about this team since Kevin Stefanski has arrived. And I am telling you, 2024 is going to be a good year, barring some unforeseen disaster. We have a long season ahead. There's going to be a lot of week by week changes. So make sure you are subscribed, hit the bell, please, and follow along because, like I said, weekly videos are
I love this guy. He's great. Terrific.
Video production presentation spectacular. Very entertaining. Yeah, so I don't like referring to it just as Bleacher Report. In this particular case, it's Maurice Moton who wrote this.
Yeah.
And I know this because Casey Kinnaman already wrote an article tearing his argument apart as well for OBR. So my biggest thing, he covers a lot of it, but my biggest thing is if you're sitting here going, well, Deshaun Watson's injury risk is high, I will then just point to Joe Burrow and go look at his elbow, and they are just as problematic. Or if you're worried about the running game, I can point to the Bengals and go, are they going to be able to run the ball this year? They got worse at running back, arguably. Is it going to be now better? So ultimately, yes, his arguments are awful. The Browns were good without Deshaun Watson. They were good without Nick Chubb. They were good without 3 offensive tackles. Even if they don't have them all for the whole season, if they get them back and they're functional, the Browns are going to be better by virtue of the fact that makes sense. They're just going to be upgrades. But I think the Browns have just a strong enough roster where it's really difficult. Again, I think it's possible the Browns could finish last. It's competitive enough. There are things that could go wrong. The Browns could finish last. But I do think that the AFC North as a whole, other teams have more questions to answer. Now, the Browns have the biggest question to answer. Deshaun Watson's effectiveness is the biggest question for the AFC North. But Joe Burrow, can he stay healthy? Lamar Jackson, can he stay healthy? And with 3 new offensive linemen this year potentially starting, with everything else they've done, losing a whole lot of guys on defense and a brain drain from the coaching staff. The Steelers are changing a whole lot of their line, which could be great for them ultimately, but might come with some growing pains. If Russell Wilson's not good and Justin Fields isn't good, where are they going to be? I still, unless they're going to pull some major trade out of the hat, I have no idea what they're going to do on 3rd and 10. That's going to be good. Yeah. I have no confidence that they're going to be able to consistently move the ball when they're behind the sticks. So there's a lot of things that the rest of the AFC North has to do to prove it. So I don't get too caught up in this, but like the arguments in that article were genuinely bad, and I was happy that Casey Kinnaman sort of already ripped them apart. But yeah, Joey has my blessing to go beat up John Middlecoff and Maurice Moton.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's almost laughable, the case like, hey, here's 5 guys that you didn't have, and that's the reason that you're not going to be good. No, they're coming back, you idiot. Like, it's just a kind of almost a reverse argument. So good job on Casey and Joey for kind of taking that down. So make sure you go read everything at the OBR. We'll have wall-to-wall coverage of camp as the guys head, like I said earlier, a light workout tomorrow, then off to the Greenbrier, and we'll have it covered for you. Fred Greetham will be checking in every day while he's out there. We will have Stainbrook checking in as well. So make sure you keep it locked on the OBR. Read all of Pete's articles. I'll have a couple out here in the next few days and into the weekend, covering everything happening, as it's an exciting time to be a Browns fan. This show, The React, will continue. and you can keep it locked here and know where you can get it. So make sure you hit like and subscribe and the notification bell so you know every time we go live on the OBR streaming network. Before we get out of here, do you have any parting words, Pete?
Yeah, I believe I had that. Today's whole show, me, right? Yeah, pretty much. That was pretty much the whole show. So yeah, no, I mean, check out the OBR stuff. We'll keep rolling out. Stuff as we get into camp and other things. But yeah, I mean, a lot of this was, other outlets are trying to get you panicked about Amari Cooper and all this other stuff. And it was basically, this could get figured out. Deadlines make deals. Deal. The offensive line situation, we'll see how it plays out. I suspect you're going to see DeJuan Jones taking left tackle reps. I'll go ahead and wait for that one to work itself out. So I would say tune in here if you want to find out what's actually going to happen, as opposed to reasons to panic and want to have all these meaningless questions that ultimately are going to be easily answered.
It really felt like Sam and Steve have been watching you, Pete. That video was literally shockingly.
I appreciate their support, checking in from the Queen City. I know that Bengals fans think or I should say the Pittsburgh Steelers fans think they're in the bag for the Bengals, and the Bengals fans think they're in the bag for basically everybody else. So I'm happy that they're tuning in to the AFC North, neighbors to the north, up I-71. And Sam Monson seems to be a closet Browns fan anyway. So
yes,
let's just go with that. We're taking over the British Isles, and if Jack's not careful, Monson's going to come over and take back everything he lost.
Very good. So there it is. Training camp is underway. We've been waiting a long time for it. It is here. Football is just around the corner. Keep it locked on the OBR streaming network for the rest of the week. You'll have OBR Weekly and All Eyes on Cleveland this week, and we have a bunch of new stuff coming as we get in a couple weeks here. You'll be inundated with new OBR stuff and content, and so make sure you keep it locked. Hit like, hit subscribe. For Pete Smith, my name is Brad Ward. This has been another edition of the OBR. Go tell a friend. Have a lovely evening. We are out.